Crispin, Cross of Lead, chapters 21 through 25. Chapter 21. He led us to a grove of trees. There he flung himself down and told me to do the same. That done, he called for a sack. He rummaged in it, producing more bread, which he tore and gave me half. When we had been silent for a while, I still brooding over my unhappy fate, he said, "I don't think you care for me." "I have no choice," I said. "Would you like one?" "God's will be done," I said. He shrugged and said, "You might not believe it, but I was fated to be a priest, in the city of York, that's far to the north." I looked at him anew. Father Quinnell was the only priest I had ever known. This huge man could not have been more different. "It seems my father grew weary of me," Bear continued, "said I caused too much trouble and ate too much. In truth," he added with sudden bitterness, "I suspect he offered me to God to fulfill a pledge he'd made in exchange for some profitable trade. Though, I ask you, what kind of man would exchange a boy for a sack of wool?" His question made me think upon my father. I tried to imagine what kind of man he might have been if he had lived, and if he would have done such a thing with me. "A punctilious man, my father," Bear went on. "He paid my fees in full, gave me his hasty blessing, and walked away. I never saw him more. Willy-nilly I was enrolled in the Benedictine Abbey to be a monk. 12 years of age, younger than you, and already in robes, an acolyte." "Did you become a monk?" I said. "I was at the Abbey for 7 years. I learned how to pray, how to be silent. I learned to read Latin, French, even English. There's that. It keeps me from the gallows." "Why?" I said, for in spite of myself I found myself interested in his story. "The law. If you can read, you're treated as a priest. Common law does not allow priests to be hanged." "But shortly before I took my final vows," he continued, "went on some errand for my fat and greasy abbot, I came upon a group of mummers in the square close to the York Minster. Their music, tricks, and most of all, their laughter, beguiled me. Perhaps it was the devil himself who took a liking to my soul. In any case, I ran off. Like you," he added with a laugh. "But how could you abandon God?" I said. "Had he not abandoned me?" "It was your father, not God, who left you," I said. I must have surprised him with my words, for he grew silent, and when he spoke again it was with less bravado. "For 10 years I travelled with those people," he said. "They became my dearest friends. We went all about the kingdom. Mind you, we lived only a tad beyond beggary, but my companions taught me better languages, the language of song, of hand, of foot, and most of all, of laughter." "Can you still be hanged, then?" "Is that your hope?" he laughed. "Not as long as I can read, but I did the next best thing. I went off to be a soldier." "And abandoned your new friends?" I said. "Not abandoned, disbanded. Only St. Anthony's knows where they went. Some wandered off, others lost their lives to brawls, jails, duels, or sickness. Some were lost to marriage. The wandering life, the mummer's life, is fragile at best," he shrugged. "In any case, I'd rather be alone." Please stop here and consider question number 1. "Then why?" I faltered. "Why what? Speak out." "Then why do you need me?" I said. In response, he reached into his pack and pulled out the leather balls again. As before, he tossed them round and round so that they seemed to float about his hands. "Here," he said, holding out the balls to me. "Let me see how skilled you are." "Me?" "Of course, you." "I can't do such things." "St. Crispin," he barked, "stand before me." Reluctantly, I took my place before him. "Now, pay attention," he said. Beginning with one ball, he demonstrated how to toss it back and forth between his hands. He told me to do the same. I did so, clumsily at first, but under his insistent commands I began to grasp his method. "There! Now," Bear said, "watch this." He took up a second ball, and along with the first began to throw it back and forth. "Do that," he said. Tossing 2 balls between my hands was quite another matter. I could barely manage it. "Again!" he shouted, "and again!" When I failed, he was always severe, insisting I try over and over again, but at last the balls began to fly from me. After sitting back and watching me intently with his shrewd eyes, he said, "Enough. We need to move on. You'll practice more. You'll add more balls as you go. Music, too, and I vow by the joys of Christ you'll learn it well." "But why?" I said. "You shall see." We continued along the muddy road. This time as we went, Bear sang at the top of his voice. Loudly sings the cuckoo. Grows the seed and blooms the meadow. Comes the spring, the woods do sing. Sing cuckoo, now sing cuckoo. Sing cuckoo, now sing cuckoo. Then from his sack he took out the music pipe, a recorder he called it, and began to play the same melody, after which he sang the verse again. Sing, he commanded. I don't know how. Crispin, if I bid you to sing, you'll sing, he said. Haltingly, I tried. Louder, I complied. As we went along, I was convinced, more than ever, that Bear was mad. Please stop here and consider question number 2. Chapter 22. Toward early evening, Bear found a secluded spot some paces off the road. There he ordered me to stand against a tree. I hesitated. Do as I say, he said. When I did, he pulled a twisted rope from his sack and, to my alarm, proceeded to tie my hands behind the tree. What are you doing? I cried, seeing this as a confirmation of his madness. I need to fetch him some food, he said, pulling the knot tight. You'll only interfere, and I don't want you running off. But I swore I wouldn't, I said. I beg you, don't leave me here. Ah, he mocked. As God in heavens knows, both wheat and trust take a full season to grow. Without another word, he went off, leaving me alone. More than once I tested the knot, determined that, despite my vow, I had run off. But no matter how I tried, I could not get loose. Instead, my arms grew numb. How long he was gone I don't know. Enough to fill my heart with more misery and make me swear violent oaths at him. I even screamed for help, though I knew help would never come. Please stop here and consider question number 3. But when I caught sight of the sack he had left behind, I told myself he was bound to return, if not for me, for it. Sure enough, he did. What's more, a large fat rabbit dangled from his hands. There, St. Crispin, he said when he came into view, a great grin on his red-bearded face. Now you can see that for good or ill, I always keep my word. He untied me. Faint from standing so long, my arms aching from being tired, I immediately sat down. Do you know the penalty for poaching? He said, as he worked his dagger skillfully to skin the rabbit. I was so angry I only shook my head. To feed us, I put both our lives in jeopardy, he said. That is the kind of freedom that exists in this kingdom. With flint, steel, and tinder he made a fire, which he told me to stoke with bits of wood. Then he took up the rabbit, spitted it, and soon had it roasting. Do you like meat? He said, seeing me with my mouth agape. I've only had it a few times, I confessed. A few times? He laughed uproariously. Ah, Crispin, the blessed saints were kind when they guided you to me. For my part, I love meat. Then he proclaimed the rabbit cooked. He tore it apart and gave me some. As I shoved the bits into my mouth with my hands, I admitted to myself it was the best food I had ever eaten. My resolve to flee abated somewhat. Later, when we had our fill, more meat than I had consumed at one time in my entire life, and the embers of the fire had burned low, Bear told me to lie down on the far side, as he wished to speak to me. What madness, I wondered, would he reveal to me now? It had grown dark. The only light was our little fire. A breeze had sprung which caused the flames to dance. Bear's red beard seemed to glitter in the firelight, so that his face, despite the dark, was equal to any sun. His bald head gleamed like the moon, and indeed, he was big enough to fill the entire sky. Then he began to speak of his many adventures, his riotous life, the marvels he had seen, the scrapes he had escaped, his fortunes good and bad. Never had I heard such tales. It was a world and a life, a way of being, utterly unknown to me. What's more, everything he talked about was stitched with laughter. It was as if life itself were a jest. Except every now and then he'd cry out with awful anger at what he called the injustices of the world. Then he spoke of his soldiering days, fighting alongside the Black Prince in Gascony and Brittany. Our master has been fighting in France for so long, I said. I have never seen him. What's his name? Lord Furnival. Furnival, Bear said. You'll be pleased to know his first home is in Great Wexley, where we're bound. I said, What manner of man is he? Bear shrugged. I saw him too much. A great landowner, and arrogant. What he lacked in fighting skills he made up for in bragging, drinking, and killing, in that order. But he's a noble knight. He snorted. Do you think that makes him less mortal? By God's everlasting bones, Crispin, war is where the Christian is truly tested. Alas, your Lord Furnival was not one to inspire faith. If there were looting and cruelty to be done, he did more than his fair share, with a falcon's eye for ransom. As for those prisoners who would yield nothing, Bear waved his hand dismissively. Doomed. Regarding his fondness for women, I shan't say, but you may believe me, as Jesus shall be our judge, your Lord Furnival shall have much to answer for. His steward is cruel, I said. A suitable pair, Bear said. And what village is that? Strongford, I said before I could catch myself. When he lapsed into silence, I thought of what Bear had said about Lord Furnival. It made me feel easy thinking it might have been a mistake to reveal my connection and where I had come from. There could be danger if Bear was truly mad and where we were going. And yet he seemed to know so much, more than any man I had met. How, I asked myself, would he consider me when he knew more of what I was? The fire smoldered, a breeze blew, a bird whistled into the dark. My uneasiness had just begun to subside when Bear said, Now, Crispin, it's time I learned the truth of you. Please stop here and consider question number 4. Chapter 23. I hardly knew what to say. I felt a desire to speak about who I was and what had happened, yet it did not seem proper. He was, after all, my master. I was his servant. We were not equal. But before I could think more on it, he said, When did your mother die? A short time ago, I said. May the blessed Saint Margaret care for her in heaven, he said, crossing himself. What manner of woman was she? Since no one had ever asked me about my mother, it was difficult to know where to begin. Just to think of her brought pain to my heart. She was shunned by the others in the village, I said, nor did she talk very much. When she did, she was bitter. Why so? I don't know. Sometimes I thought it was because she was slight and frail. The steward, the bailiff, and the reeve always set her the difficult tasks. More often than not, they made her work alone. But though she worked as hard as she could, she received little thanks. To my surprise, there was a relief in speaking. How strange it was to have someone listen to me. I went on. Sometimes she would hold me close to her. At other times, she seemed to find me repulsive. Sometimes I thought it was the cause of her misery. And your father? He died before I was born, in the pestilence. No other kin? None. His eyes narrowed. How can that be? I shrugged. My mother said that they also died in the Great Death. A common enough story. I escaped it. How? By running as far north as I could go, to Scotland's wild northern isles. Had your mother no surname? I never knew it. Do you ever want to know these unknown things about your name, your mother, your father? I do, I said, but I don't know how. He was quiet for a while, as if thinking on what I said. Then he said, Now, Crispin, tell me of how you became proclaimed a wolf's head. Please stop here and consider question number 5. Chapter 24. By then I had slipped so easily into talking I simply told him what had happened as much as I could recall. When I had done, he asked, And they proclaimed you a wolf's head for that? I nodded. To be a wolf's head is to say you're no longer human, so anyone may kill you. He grinned. Even me. But, he went on seriously, your priest told you to flee. Yes. And since your steward tried to kill you, your priest was proved right. After a moment, I said, And they killed Father Quinnell. Bear sat bolt upright. Killed the priest? He cried. In the sacred name of Jesus. Why? I don't know. But when he told me I had to leave, he also promised me he'd tell me something of importance just before I left. Instead, he was slain. Have you any idea what he was to say? Something about my father and mother, so I think his death was my doing. God was punishing me by killing his priest. It's a thing I've noticed, the big man said, laughing with scorn, that the greater a man, or boy's, ignorance of the world, the more certain he is that he sits in the center of that world. I hung my head. Crispin, he said after a moment of silence, I'll give you some advice. You're full of sadness. Those who bring remorse are shunned. Do you know why? I shook my head. Because sorrow is the common fate of man. Who then would want more? But wit and laughter, Crispin, why, no one ever has enough. When I think on the imperfections of our Saviour, I choose to think most upon his most perfect laughter. It must have been the kind that makes us laugh too, for mirth is the coin that brings a welcome. Lose your sorrows, and you'll find your freedom. Please stop here and consider question number 6. I remembered the word, freedom, as one which Father Quintal used. After a moment I said, But you gave me no choice but to stay with you. His eyes flashed with anger enough so that I regretted I had spoken. But then, as happened so often with him, he laughed. Crispin, do you know why my hat is split into 2 parts? No. Like all men with a skill, I wear the livery of my trade. For me, the 2-part hat informs the world that there's more than a simple nature residing in my soul. There's bad and good. But I am only bad, I thought to myself, wishing yet again to know what sin was embedded in me to have brought God's hand so hard upon me. Crispin, said Bear, a wise man, he was a jester by trade, once told me that living by answers is a form of death. It's only questions that keep you living. What do you think of that? I don't know, I said. Think on it, for we shall soon be passing out of this zone of desolation. From here on, as God is good, many living villages shall appear. They'll be small, but if we labor well, we can survive, you and I. Will you join me? I give you the freedom to choose. You're my master, I said. I have no choice. Crispin, decide, he barked. I shook my head. It's not for me to do so. Should not every man be master of himself? He asked. You made me call you master. His face grew redder than it normally was. You're a willful fool, he bellowed. Clearly frustrated, he poked the fire. You'll go. As you command, I said. He frowned, but only said, Before we get there, you'll need to learn some things. What? Time enough for that tomorrow. Go to sleep. Without further ado, he lay down. Please stop here and consider question number 7. From the pouch around my neck, I took out my cross of lead, and upon my knees prepared to pray. What are you doing? I heard him ask. I looked over my shoulder. Praying? What's that in your hand? A cross of lead. It was my mother's, I said, holding it out for him to see. It even has writing on it. Writing or not, it's useless, he said, waving his hand away. No more than a trinket. What do you mean? I cried, fearing he was slipping back into madness. All these things, your cross, your prayers, as God is near, and surely he always is. You need no special words or objects to approach him. But this cross, I began. He cut me off. I know what it is. It's made of lead, made in countless numbers during the Great Death. Never blessed, they were given to the dying as false comfort. They're as common as the leaves and just as sacred. Crispin, as Jesus is my witness, churches, priests, they're all unneeded. The only cross you need is the one in your heart. Greatly shocked, I didn't know what to say. But, he added with a hard edge of anger, if you so much as spoke my words in public, do you know what would happen to you? No. You'd be burned alive, so don't repeat them. And if you said I spoke them, I'll denounce you for a liar and a heretic. So put your cross away. I don't wish to see it again. Keep your faith to yourself. Though unsettled by his words, I turned away and made my prayers, the cross in my hands. I prayed to St. Giles and asked him to remember my father, whom I had never seen, my mother, whom I missed so deeply, and last of all, myself. I also promised him I'd not believe the things Bear had said. Though Bear must have heard me, he did not interfere. When I was done, I said, Bear, I'm sorry I knew so little. Sometimes it's better not to know. How can that be? Crispin, if I had learned one thing, it's that he who knows a little bit of everything knows nothing. But he who knows a little bit well knows much of all. He said no more, and was soon asleep, grunting like a pig. The fire had collapsed into a heap of smoldering coals. The night being cold, I drew closer to it and tried to make sense of the things that Bear had said. He had confused me. First he said it was better to live by questions. Then he said it was a mistake to know everything. I struggled to put the two notions together, but could not. What I did know was that he was unlike any man I had ever known. There was madness in him, to be sure, yet I could not deny some kindness, too. But what vexed me most was his saying that every man should be master of himself. If I knew anything, it was that all men belonged to someone. Surely God himself put us all in our places, lords to rule and fight, clergy to pray, all the rest, like me, were on earth to labor, to serve our masters and our God. Otherwise, it was as much to say stars could go their own way instead of being fixed to turn around our world. Bear had to be wrong. Yet I found myself thinking it was not so bad to have fallen in with him. To be sure, he was a rough and ready man. The things he said confused me. Even his calling me by the name Crispin was unsettling. Still, if Bear fed me and protected me, I might at least survive a while. In any case, I had little choice. God had willed it. And yet, thinking on what he had said, I asked myself, if I were to live by questions, what questions would they be? About my father? And those things Father Quintal had said about my mother, if they be true or not. And maybe, I allowed, I'd ask what was to be my fate. Please stop here and consider question number 8. Chapter 25. When I woke in the morning, I had spent so much time with Bear's strange idea that I was cross in mood, not wishing to deal with him. Nonetheless, he informed me that it was time to begin teaching me some skills. He explained how upon entering a town he played and danced, heading straight for the village church. There I pray, hopefully at a mass. I said, I thought you didn't believe in such things. What I think, Crispin, stays in my head. What I do is there for all the world to see. I must show reverence. I don't understand you, I burst out, surprising even myself. You tell me I don't need a church, then you talk like a priest. What are you? A man, nothing more or less. And you? Nothing. Why do you insist on that? Because I have no name, I said, my rage bursting forth. No home, no kin, no place in this world. I am a wolf's head. Any and all may kill me when they choose, even you. You say you want me to do things, think things, but when I won't be able to, you shun or betray me like the rest. I had never said so many words in one breath in all my life. When I'd done, I turned away, alarmed I had spoken to my master in such a fashion. Crispin, in the name of all the blessed saints, have you ever desired to be anything different from what you are? We must be content to be as God made us, I said. What if God wishes you to better yourself? Then he will do so. Crispin, he said, grabbing me by the neck and hauling me along. Come with me. He dragged me to a little stream where we had fetched our water. Have you ever seen what you look like? He said. A little, by our river, but I don't like to. Gaze upon yourself, he said. Puzzled, I did as he bid, staring at my image in the flowing water. My long hair, my dirty, bruised, and tear-streaked face, my red-rimmed eyes. Now then, he commanded, wash your face. Use sand to scrub it. Go on, or by God I'll do it for you. After I did as he told me, he picked up his dagger. What are you going to do? I cried. Cut your hair. Now look at yourself again, he said when he had done. What do you see now? I considered my reflection anew. Are you different? He said. A little, I said. And that was only water and a blade. Think what you might become if you were cleansed of 13 years of dirt, neglect, and servitude. I turned back to my image and gaze. It was different. For a moment I allowed myself to wonder what it would be like to alter the rest of myself as well. Please stop here and consider question number 9. As I was trying to tell you, Bear said, interrupting my thoughts, when I reach a village, I apply to the priest, to the local lord or bailiff, the reeve if necessary, anyone in authority from whom I can get permission to perform. And you wish me to go with you? I asked. Of course. But Bear, I said, what if I am recognized? Crispin, you are altered. Who would recognize you now? Anyone from Stromford. By the certainty of St. Paul, they are gone. They'll never bother you again. But what if they do? First you say you are nothing. Then you say half the world is looking for you. Make up your mind, if you have one. But Bear, I said, the steward tried to kill me twice, and when I was hiding in the woods he came along the road. I'm sure he was searching for me. He looked at me slyly. For an insignificant creature, you're very vain. Give me one reason for their certain. They think I'm a thief. Crispin, did you steal? As God is my witness, no. Then it is all a sham. You were only being blamed for what someone else did. But it's they who matter, not me. Then I shall make you matter, he said. I'll teach you music. I won't be able to learn, I said. Do the birds sing? He asked. Yes. Do they have souls? I don't think so, I said, somewhat confused. Then surely you can sing no less than they, for you have a soul. Sometimes. I think I have none. For once Bear was speechless. In the name of Saint Regimus, why? I have never felt it. Bear gazed at me in silence. Then we, he said gruffly, shall need to make sure you do. Please stop here and consider question number 10.